Echoes of History. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Echoes of History, the podcast where we unravel the grand narratives and pivotal moments that shaped our world. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're tackling one of history's most enduring and fascinating questions. How did the mighty Roman Empire, a civilization that once stretched from the sands of Africa to the misty shores of Britain, eventually collapsed? This isn't just an academic exercise. Understanding Rome's decline offers profound insights into the fragility of power, the complexities of governance, and the relentless march of change. When we think of the fall of Rome, many of us picture a sudden, dramatic event, a city besieged, legions routed, a complete and swift end. But the reality is far more nuanced, more protracted, and arguably more compelling. It wasn't a single hammer blow, but a long, slow unraveling, a tapestry fraying thread by thread over centuries. Today, we're going to pull apart those threads, exploring the internal vulnerabilities and external pressures that led to the decline and eventual transformation of the Western Roman Empire. So, pour yourself a Roman-inspired beverage, perhaps some spiced wine, or just a good old cup of tea, and let's journey back to a time when a civilization that seemed eternal began to show its cracks. To truly grasp the complexity of Rome's decline, we first need to dispel the myth of a singular fall. Historians debate endlessly about the precise causes and even the exact date. The traditional date often cited is 476 AD, when the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. But even then, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to flourish for another 1,000 years, preserving Roman law, culture, and power in a different form. So rather than a collapse, it's perhaps more accurate to speak of a transformation or a gradual fragmentation of the Western Empire. And this process was driven by a multitude of factors, often intertwined, creating a kind of historical perfect storm. Let's start by looking inward at the internal weaknesses that slowly corroded the empire from within. Our first major theme is political instability and corruption. For centuries, Rome had struggled with the peaceful transfer of power. Unlike modern democracies, there was no clear constitutional process for succession. Emperors often came to power through military might, assassination, or dynastic struggles. This led to what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, a period from 235 to 284 AD, where Rome saw no fewer than 26 emperors in just 50 years. Most met violent ends. Imagine the chaos, constant civil wars, armies loyal to individual generals rather than the state, and a political system paralyzed by infighting. This incessant turmoil drained the treasury, disrupted trade, and diverted military resources away from defending the empire's borders. The Roman state became a giant, unwieldy machine, constantly at war with itself, eroding the trust and loyalty of its citizens. Hand in hand with political chaos was economic strain and social decay. Running an empire of Rome's size and ambition was incredibly expensive. Maintaining vast armies, building monumental architecture, and supporting an increasingly lavish imperial court required immense resources. Originally, Rome's economy thrived on conquest, new lands, slaves, and plunder flowing into the treasury. But by the 2nd century AD, the empire had reached its maximum expansion. The conquests largely stopped, cutting off a vital source of revenue. To compensate, emperors began debasing the coinage, reducing silver or gold content, leading to rampant inflation. Prices soared, making goods unaffordable for ordinary citizens. Taxation became oppressive, particularly for the rural poor. Many farmers, burdened by taxes and the constant threat of barbarian raids, abandoned their land and sought protection from wealthy landowners, creating a feudal-like system long before the Middle Ages officially began. This led to a decline in agricultural productivity and a shift from a money-based economy to a barter system in many regions. The vast gulf between the super-rich and the struggling poor widened dramatically. Cities, once vibrant centers of trade and culture, saw their middle class shrink. The rich retreated to fortified rural estates, becoming increasingly self-sufficient, while the urban poor struggled, often relying on bread and circuses, government handouts, and entertainment to keep discontent at bay. This erosion of the social fabric weakened the collective identity and civic pride that had once been hallmarks of Roman citizenship. While internal weaknesses brewed, external pressures were relentlessly mounting. This brings us to our next major theme: military overstretch and external threats. Rome's military was its backbone, a force renowned for its discipline and engineering prowess. But by the later empire, this backbone was severely strained. The empire's borders were vast, thousands of miles needing constant vigilance. This meant an enormous military budget and a constant demand for manpower. The quality of the legions also began to decline. As the empire became more settled, fewer Romans wanted to endure the harsh life of a soldier. The army increasingly relied on non-Roman recruits, often Germanic peoples, who were excellent warriors, but whose primary loyalty might be to their own commanders or tribes rather than to Rome itself. These mercenary-like forces were expensive and sometimes unreliable. Compounding this was the rise of formidable external threats. From the 4th century onwards, various Germanic tribes, the Goths, Vandals, Franks, Lombards, and others, began to put immense pressure on Rome's borders. These were not always savage invaders. Often they were peoples displaced by other, more terrifying forces, most notably the Huns from Central Asia, led by their infamous leader Attila. Pushed westward by the Huns, these tribes sought refuge and land within Roman territory, sometimes peacefully, often violently. A pivotal moment came in 378 AD at the Battle of Adrianople, where the Visigoths decisively defeated and killed Emperor Valens. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological blow that shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. It showed that Roman armies could be not just defeated, but annihilated, and Roman emperors could die on the battlefield. From that point on, the trickle of barbarian incursions turned into a flood. The Visigoths sacked Rome itself in 410 AD, an event that sent shockwaves across the known world, even though the city was no longer the political center of the empire. Later, the Vandals sacked Rome in 455 AD. These events, while perhaps not fatal blows to the empire's administration, were devastating symbols of its diminished power and inability to protect its very heart. So with all these pressures, why did the Western Empire fall, while the Eastern, or Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for another millennium? This leads us to our final major theme, the East-West divide and the final act. The Roman Empire was formally divided into Western and Eastern halves in 395 AD by Emperor Theodosius I, largely for administrative efficiency given its immense size. But this division exacerbated existing differences. The Eastern Empire was generally wealthier, more urbanized, and had a more defensible capital in Constantinople. Its economy was stronger, its population larger, and its borders, while still under threat, were somewhat more manageable. It could often afford to pay off barbarians or pit them against each other, buying time and diverting threats westward. The Western Empire, on the other hand, was poorer, more agrarian, and its frontiers were longer and more exposed, particularly along the Rhine and Danube rivers. It was constantly battling multiple barbarian groups across a vast territory, stretching its resources to the breaking point. By the mid-5th century, the Western Empire was a shadow of its former self. Its authority had largely collapsed in many provinces, which were now controlled by various Germanic kingdoms. Britain had been abandoned. Gaul was largely under Frankish and Visigothic control. North Africa was dominated by the Vandals, and Spain by the Visigoths. What remained of imperial authority was largely confined to Italy. And so we arrive at that symbolic year, 476 AD. Romulus Augustulus, a child emperor, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic general leading a confederation of barbarian troops. Odoacer didn't claim the title of emperor for himself. Instead, he sent the imperial regalia to the Eastern Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, effectively acknowledging Zeno as the sole emperor and implying that the West no longer needed its own. He simply became the de facto ruler of Italy. This wasn't a sudden cataclysm. Life for most people in Italy didn't drastically change overnight. Roman law and administration continued in many areas under new barbarian rulers, who often admired Roman culture and sought to integrate rather than destroy it. But crucially, the centralized political authority of the Western Roman state was gone. The idea of a unified, all-encompassing Western Empire faded, replaced by a patchwork of smaller Germanic kingdoms. Short reflective musical interlude, 5 seconds. Alex, the story of Rome's fall is not just a tale of decline, It's a profound lesson in the dynamics of civilizations. It teaches us that no empire, no matter how powerful, is eternal. It demonstrates the dangerous interplay of internal decay and external pressure, the consequences of political instability, economic mismanagement, and military overextension. But perhaps most importantly, it highlights the concept of transformation rather than mere collapse. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was not the end of everything. Roman law, Latin language, architectural styles, administrative structures, and the very idea of empire continued to influence the emerging European kingdoms for centuries. The Catholic Church, headquartered in Rome, became a powerful unifying force in the vacuum left by imperial authority, preserving much of Roman learning and culture. In many ways, the Dark Ages were also a period of adaptation, where Roman and Germanic cultures merged to form the foundations of medieval Europe. The legacy of Rome is all around us, in our legal systems, our languages, our architecture, and our understanding of governance and citizenship. Understanding how such a colossus eventually crumbled helps us appreciate the intricate web of factors that sustain or undermine societies, offering valuable insights for our own complex world. As we look back at the grandeur and eventual fragmentation of the Roman Empire, we're reminded that history is never simple. It's a continuous flow of rise, adaptation, and change. The questions surrounding Rome's collapse continue to resonate, urging us to consider the strengths and vulnerabilities within our own civilizations. Theme music fades in.
Next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep deciphering the world-changing history that surrounds us. I'm Alex, and this has been Echoes of History.